That's his, not mine.
I'm not with him. Just closing
Oh, okay.
Sign that.
That was great.
How are you?
I think he's off now. But that was what he was on Lake Oswego City Council. And that was one thing that this there's nothing private.
There we are. Thank you.
Here it is. Worse than that.
I don't know how the guy has time. It's like,
It's his passion.
They're a couple. They're a pair, and she's there. Yeah.
It's his passion, so he does
it is his passion.
and more. Oh, yeah. And like I said, now this is not.
Well, I'm trying to not
Oh, yeah.
It takes certain personality. You gotta build skin. I feel like the leather
Skin, yeah.
They grill you on the spot. You should say nothing. Do you see? Some of them just get. Some of them first you get things. And I said, well, you know, cool. This is part of it. All right. Yeah.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Haven't seen you in a little while.
And then the next day we're in Seattle. It was just like that. He's in Seattle. We're flying home tonight, and then we'll fly back tomorrow. Fly home in 5 days. So every day.
How are your kids adjusting to this back and forth?
Not that, and then only one of us go at a time.
Oh, good.
So I'm usually like this Friday I'll be out. When after I go out, and I'll be.
You have a good holiday?
Yes. How about yourself?
Good.
Did you go back east?
Yeah, quick trip.
She's
4
a young
days.
woman now.
Oh, that is.
Connecticut, New York.
Oh, wow.
And right before I went back, my daughter had twins.
Oh,
She
congratulations.
delivered 2 months premature.
And the fun begins.
I cannot live there, but I don't.
Yeah, I don't know if I could either.
Yeah.
Even after a couple of weeks, I was ready to come home. And as soon as I got home, I was ready to go back. But yeah.
Yeah.
Have a good New Year? We did, and it was very nice. And it was like so fast. How about you guys?
Of course, same.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
Dyer, Nevada.
Hi, how are you?
I always sit here. Happy New Year.
New Year, yes, for sure.
It's my Irish.
I'm like
Like
Sheldon.
I move around.
That's good. You know, a hug it does a lot of
I'm
good
like
things.
Sheldon
Oh,
on Big
well,
Bang. This is my chair.
Your chair.
Oh.
Gun shy.
Yeah.
You have good holiday.
Wonderful. How about you?
It's always it was over quickly when I
Yeah.
came back. It was like
Yeah. Did you stay in town or go out?
we were in town and then went to Bend.
Oh, nice. Did Ben get snow? I was out of town. I love it. Kind of like first snow being over there and stuff.
Oh no.
I got the opposite. I got a lot of sun, so it felt really good.
You gotta do kind of one or the other.
Then I froze to death when I got home.
Let's get out.
Yeah.
Changes.
Just change.
I almost joined you. I'm wearing a tie.
Yeah.
I'll do that next time.
You know, I cannot be 100% casual.
Good morning. We're going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. And I'll start with a asking for a motion and second to grant a leave of absence to Commissioner Chamberlain, who's out of town.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of December 12th, 2018.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And I'll ask Curtis for the executive director's report, please.
Terrific. Thank you, President Kupro-Comas. Let me start first by recognizing our new employees who are here in the back of the room. If you are in this class of new Port employees, will you please raise your hand so we can see where you are back there? There you go. Look at that. So a great, diverse, really interesting bunch of new employees who I got to spend a little bit of time with last week. Again, a crop of folks from around the region, really interesting and diverse backgrounds. Just really nice to see fresh blood. Like most classes of new employees, it's about 65% private sector, 35 public. Really fun group. So really grateful to have you all here today. If I could, you'll note that we've had on rotation up here our safety champions for the month. There they are. Congratulations to the 4 folks on that list. Again, folks from around the port who have really focused on safety and the things that they do every day. And I just want to reiterate how important that is for us and how important it is that those folks are out there in different parts of the business really making an effort to prioritize safety. So, Stan, I wonder if you'd share with us a safety message for today.
Sure. First, I thought I'd give just a brief report on the port's progress in calendar year 2018 on our safety and health journey, seeing how the years just ended. So in 2018, we did take a lot of ground on our journey to advance our safety culture here at the port. We invested in our people, our processes, resources, and I thought I'll just highlight a few of the significant accomplishments. First, I think I may have mentioned this before, but we did conduct a safety perception survey of all employees, and the results came in. We reviewed the results, we identified gaps, and based on those gaps, now we have action plans that have been developed and are being implemented in each of the business lines. We also developed a corrective action planning tool, and it's being used to ensure that hazards and opportunities identified by employees are getting resolved to closure. And we also developed a new employee safety and health policy, which has been published, it's been posted, it's been shared with all employees. We've communicated our commitment to a safe and healthy workplace through that policy. While these systems accomplishments were being put in place, the employees of the port had a fantastic year. They lowered their total recordable injury rate by nearly 50% from the previous year to the lowest rate ever achieved by the Port of Portland. It sits at 1.9 at the end of the year. And we went from, it was 25 cases down to 13 cases in 2018.
Stan, at the risk of being rude and interrupting, will you say that again? 1.9. I just want to
is
emphasize
our total recordable incident rate
the lowest
in port history.
So really extraordinary performance. I just want to point it out really to all the people of the port. Really great work and focusing on safety. I'm just so grateful and proud of everyone for really focusing on safety. It's a great result.
And even as equally important, our lost time cases were decreased by 70% from 10 to 3. So just a really great year. I also want to thank all the employees of the port for a great year of safety performance. And we're still not there. We are still moving towards our goal of 0 injuries at the port. So I applaud all the employees for their efforts this year. Now to my safety message for the month. The safety message today aims to bring awareness to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency that they have designated January as the National Radon Action Month. Radon gas is a radioactive byproduct from the natural breakdown of uranium in rock, soil, and water. And radon enters your home from the ground underneath it, and people cannot see, smell, or taste radon. However, if it is present indoors at high concentration levels, it can be a danger to the occupants. The U.S. Surgeon General warns that radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States, with 21,000 lung cancer deaths caused each year. And testing is really the only way to know if radon buildup is a risk in a home. So since you spend most of your time sleeping, after work, and weekends in your home, the concentration level needs to be understood. So I want to encourage everyone to take action this month. A simple and inexpensive radon test can give you the information you need to make an informed decision about whether radon gas mitigation measures would be appropriate for your own home. Along with this, there's more information available on the EPA and State Health Department websites. And so, Curtis, with that, that's my safety message.
Great. Thank you, Stan. And again, thank you both to you and the safety team. I see Steve behind you there, but also all employees for the safety performance this year. Really extraordinary. I want to just briefly note that both President Kuprokoumas and I were absent last month. We were in Asia. I think I briefed you all before our departure about what we were heading to do, but we went with Keith Levitt and his commercial team, had some really productive meetings, primarily around air service development, both in Japan around the Tokyo complex, and hope to continue service with Delta into Tokyo, but also to Incheon in Seoul, where we had, I would say, optimistic reception from Delta about maintaining a slot for PDX in Incheon. We're hopeful that that will be part of our future, where we'll have a connection into South Korea, which provides onward flights through primarily Korean Air into the rest of Asia. Just real great opportunities for us on the air service development side. We also had a number of, I'd say, positive and hopeful meetings around continued service at T6 or potential return of some container services at T6. We'll keep you posted on that, but I'll just say the commercial team has really been doing a great job out there, and it was a productive week for us. At the forefront of everyone's minds who were watching something other than, I don't know what, streaming Bird Box on TV last night, the government shutdown. We have a number of federal employees closely linked with our activity, as is probably obvious from permitting through daily activity. There's a lot, but first and foremost, TSA, Customs Border Protection, and FAA here at the airport are all subject to the shutdown. For the most part, everyone's working and not being paid at CBP and TSA, and some mix of critical and non-critical at FAA. We haven't seen a lot of impact yet, and I just want to say thank you to the folks in particular at TSA who are showing up without being paid. They're doing a great job over there. For anyone here or anyone on the port team who has a chance to see someone in a blue uniform and say thank you, we really appreciate their engagement. I know our team was out yesterday and today, I believe, to say thank you, put out sort of donuts and coffee, buying pizzas for those federal employees who are uncertain about what the future looks like. And I'll just note we haven't seen the kind of wholesale phoning in sick that some other airports have seen. It speaks to the high quality of folks who are here and working at the airport every day. So we'll keep you posted. We're hopeful that it ends soon and folks can get checks in the mail or in their bank as quickly as possible. As you may know, the United States is the only industrialized country in the world that does not mandate a paid parental leave. That, for whatever reason, is unlikely to change. A number of public employers, including Multnomah County and the City of Portland and the Port of Seattle, do provide paid parental leave. And as of January 1st of this year, we at the Port of Portland will also be providing paid parental leave. That benefit will be 100% of employees' salaries who qualify for up to 8 weeks. It's an exciting change, really helps us level the playing field for employees, and I'd say recognizes our organizational commitment to equity internally. So really happy about that. On to other business. While final numbers are not quite available yet, we're close. We think the annual passenger numbers at PDX is around 19.9 million. There's a little bit of an over-under. I think Vince is collecting bets right now. Of course, no cash is accepted. Is that right, Vince? We do expect to exceed 20 million passengers this year, of course. The 19.9 something is a 4% increase on a year before. So continued growth. Again, not quite the 7 or so % we saw 2 or 3 years ago, but still substantive growth. And you'll be hearing more about PDX Next as we hope to address those concerns around growth. In sad news, I'm not on the public announcement system in PDX right now. We have replaced the elegant tones of Curtis Robinhold with Storm Large, a singer for the band Pink Martini. She's helping us ring in the new year with a message for passengers throughout the month of January. And then finally on PDX Next updates, as you know, we're working out here on Concourse B and A, eventually to be closing A and renovating in a very big way B to add capacity and flow for Alaska and Horizon passengers, both with jetways and ground loading. We'll begin that work later this year with a shift of the ground loading capability out to the end of Concourse C, which will then enable us to close A and begin work. So watch this space. It's going to be a pretty concerted and specific move right at the end of the summer so that we can get through the high summer flow and into a little quieter period in the fall to make that move. The PDX Community Advisory Committee and its sponsors, the Port, along with the cities of Portland and Vancouver, are celebrating 5 years of successful work as the Community Advisory Committee with a reception on January 23rd. It will include a review of the airport futures. Again, this look that we do, thinking about what we're going to need and how we're going to look in the future. Very exciting, and again, very grateful to the folks who help us on that Community Advisory Committee. And then finally, a bit of excitement on the marine side. We'll be receiving later this month a break bulk vessel loaded with Vestas wind turbine components. These are tower segments. It's another step in that diversification of T6 that we're very excited about. I believe it's 5 vessel calls. Is that right, Keith? 3 vessel calls at T6 with Vestas parts. They are wind turbines that are bound for Arlington in Eastern Oregon. So very excited about that. And with that, Madam President, the end of my remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis. And I want to commend the Port for its continued focus on the community of employees here. I think the focus on safety, which continues and which clearly shows great results, as well as the parental leave policy, shows the concern for folks who work here and do all the hard work on behalf of the Port. So thank you for that. With that, I'll take a motion and second for approval of the Executive Director's report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment today? Okay, thank you. So, Curtis, if you can introduce the first general discussion item, please.
Great. First general discussion item begins with our friends from the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. And I don't know, David, are you leading the conversation? We're starting with this conversation because recently at an event that we did together with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, David and I had a David Harrelson, who's with us today. And David, I wonder if I could impose on you when I'm done to introduce the folks who are with you today. It would be terrific to know who all is here. David and I started a conversation about sort of the desire to more closely link the activities of our different groups and my own recognition that we are here on lands that were forcibly stolen from people over many generations who had been here for thousands of years. He noted that we had in our commission chamber Chinookan art that was done recently, and I asked, when exactly was that? And it was before my time here at the Port, and coincidentally before anyone on the commission was here, and so we decided. I guess I decided in the conversation it would be great for you all to hear more from the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, both about the presence here, but also about the art. And so David Harrelson is joining us today to help us with that conversation. Thank you very much for coming, and for you and your colleagues for joining us today.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, commissioners in the Port of Portland. I'll introduce everyone else and then tell you a little bit about myself. We have Tribal Council Secretary John George with us, our delegation. We have Tribal Councilwoman Denise Harvey as well. We have Tribal Council Chief of Staff for Tribal Council, Stacia Hernandez. We have Sarah Thompson, our Deputy Press Secretary, and then we have Michael Carnosh, our Ceded Lands Program Manager. So that's our delegation today. My name is David Harrelson. I'm our Cultural Resources Manager at Grand Ronde. I get the pleasure of leading a group of 20 staff on everything from cultural resources, archaeology, museum. Is this loud enough? Can you guys hear me?
Will you push your button? It is? Yeah,
it is
we'll
on.
just get some volume for you.
So in that capacity, I found myself here 5 years ago, having no idea that this art was in this place either, and that it really does a wonderful honor of our peoples in this place. And I was very surprised, and I've been able to have a really great working relationship with the staff at the port to address cultural resources concerns with other projects, including receiving different awards, those projects receiving awards for some of those same solutions over the few years. What I'm hoping to convey today is that the airport itself and many port properties and facilities are on the homelands of our ancestors that have been here since time immemorial. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of history, and then we're going to talk about some of this art on the walls and understanding this rich heritage that it reflects. So the picture that you have before you is a field of wapato. Out on Savi's Island, actually. And wapato is a traditional food that you eat the tuber. And people came from all over the region to this place, and the people here were wealthy because of wapato. It's a wetland plant. Some people call it arrowroot. Let's see if I can figure this thing out. Here we go. Next. Oh, perfect. So when we talk about indigenous people, we're talking about the people of place. When we talk about that, we're talking a really long time. We have oral histories that geologists can date back to 18,000 years ago. We remember the floods. These are the same people that have maintained in place for a very long time. Archaeologists can help fill that in. We get to about 3,000-year-old archaeology sites along the river, the Columbia itself. But if you just go a little bit further up, like around Willamette Falls, there's archaeology that's 9,000 years old. Some of the oldest archaeology documented in North America is in the state of Oregon at around 14,000 years ago. And for those of you that aren't history inclined, that's 7 times the Roman Empire or 7 times Jesus. Sometimes that helps people. So when we talk about the indigenous people of this area of Portland, we're talking about the Multnomah, the Clackamas, the Clawley-Walla, the Cascades. These are some of the names that have been documented by anthropologists and understanding and learning who our ancestors are. So the 2 maps that you have in front of you are indicating where those peoples were. And we have to talk about Chinook and who Chinook people are. So the Chinook is an ethnicity of people that live from the mouth of the Columbia River all the way up to Celilo Falls. And eventually when treaties were made, there were some people that signed treaties, some people that didn't sign treaties, some people that were removed to various reservations. So there's Chinook people at least 5 reservations throughout the Northwest as an ethnic group of people that spoke their own language. There's actually lower Chinook language and upper Chinook language. So they had completely different languages from one another as well. The people in this area are the Clackamas as well as the Cascades. So here's a picture that was drawn in the early 1800s of Clackamas men. You'll specifically note the cranial deformation or head flattening of the man in the front of a straight line from the brow to the back of the head, which was done as children. It was a sign and mark of nobility. When we talk about cultural geography, you're looking at a map. For most people, history starts at Lewis and Clark. When we talk about Oregon, that's not where our history starts, but I think it's useful. This is the map that Clark drew of Portland. To draw your attention, this first circle over here, this is where the airport is today. I've named the name of the village that he notes in 1805, 1806 as near Chokiu. It's tricky. I had a whole conversation with linguists about this, so if I can't pronounce it, it's okay if you can't pronounce it too. To orient you, this is the Willamette River down here by this village cluster. It should be really noteworthy, and if you guys think about this geography quite a bit, the Chinook word for the mouth of the Willamette River is the dammed up place, because there was no channel, right? Savi's Island was this big delta, and Multnomah Channel, and the water just pushed out over it. So Lewis and Clark missed the mouth of the Willamette River. They had no idea that there was a river there until they were returning back up the river, and Indians told them, yeah, there's a really big river right there, and there happens to even be a falls a number of miles up the river. This is where all that Wapato was. It's perfect habitat for a lot of the traditional foods that our people depended upon. This is the interior of a Chinook lodge drawn in the 1800s. We had huge gable roof structures. We didn't live in teepees on this side of the mountains. And it was a real surprise to early settlers and explorers who had been across the plains seeing people live in teepees and hide structures to come and not see a saw in sight or nails and huge gabled structures. And that's all made possible by Western red cedar. It's, if you know firewood, it's the best kindling. Well, it's because it has that grain in it, and you can split planks off of it. You can drive wedges, and it allows you to have a whole material culture completely different than other places. You see people gambling down in the corner there. He's playing stick game. He's hiding bones. You see that there's dogs at that time that are a part of society. If you look close at this image, you actually see some of the detailed art that's kind of obscured or vague, clearly not understood by the artists themselves. And a large pit fire in the middle with a fish drying rack is the main feature in the middle of the image. So lifeways and seasonal round. A lot of people have a basic understanding of, well, are tribes nomadic or are they sedentary? Well, it doesn't really fit an understanding of Northwest peoples and our ancestors. Our people moved around the landscape and seasonally went to individual locations to gather resources and then bring them back to their winter storehouses. So this is one that still exists today. It was actually recreated at the site of Kathlepodal, which today is Ridgefield National Wildlife Refuge. And if you haven't been, I really encourage you to go visit. It's open. It's run by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And it's a model of a traditional plank house. On the right, you see Columbia River art. Also, you see the image over the door. You'll note some of these patterns look very similar to the art here in this building. It should be noteworthy, and we spoke about treaties. Tribes are sovereign entities, and our tribal people were removed from our homelands. 2 reservations, as I spoke about. The people in this area signed the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855. My own grandfather, many generations ago, was a signatory of that treaty, but he signed for the Kalapuya people. At Grand Round, there's other tribal members that are directly descendant from people like John Wachino, who signed the treaty for the Clackamas, Oregon City John, that signed the treaty for the Clawley-Walla, the people of Willamette Falls, as well as people like Chief Tumulth, who signed the treaty for the Cascades, only to be executed by Phil Sheridan on a trumped-up charge that he had attacked someone. These are the people that signed the treaty, and those people came to the Grand Round Indian Reservation. I want to talk about Columbia River art just to kind of finish off, since you guys have this beautiful space here. And I thought no better, and I'm going to read the quote here that's up, and it's from the actual artists that did these pieces that wrote a chapter in the book that was recently out, a compilation about the Chinookan people, Chinookan peoples of the Columbia River. And they describe Columbia River art as the lower Columbia River Valley is the focal point of the distinctive and little-known Chinookan art style. Chinookan art is steeped in social and religious meaning with a focus on individual spirit powers. The Chinookan art style, which appears in the utilitarian objects of material culture, uses geometric shapes as elaboration and in representational figures while employing a unique perspective on human and animal forms. And if you look at this, it's exactly what you see. The door handles are not only a utilitarian object today, but if you look at them when you grab them, they're actually straight adze is what's used for carving. So they themselves are a utilitarian object modeled after utilitarian object with decorative forms of, in the case on this side, humans, right? Anthropomorphic imagery. And on the case of the other doors, that's an owl, and it's a zoomorphic image. So this is modern art today that people are influenced, but there's deep traditions of this that comes out of the archaeology sites up and down the Columbia River, as well as families. And these are some of those archaeological objects. Also in Portland, you have stone carving. These are this is all at the Portland Art Museum. So you have the ability to see that. On the right, that's actually a stone off of Savi's Island that is said that if you touch the stone, the weather's supposed to change. So we always wonder when we see the weather dramatically shifting if some curator isn't cleaning the weather stone. Maybe the port can work something out with the Portland Art Museum. You'll also see these shapes of shapes inside of shapes, which is kind of indicative of the spirit world or the other side. Other common motifs are rib shapes. So you see the ribs themselves, prominent brow, forehead, eyes, mouth. This is what the archaeology of this art form looks like. This is what the art form can look like today, and it was absolutely forward-thinking and absolutely spectacular that when these facilities were constructed, this art form graces this room, because this is where that village used to be. There's a deep knowing and a connection of place. And I know of very few other organizations or institutions that have prominently featured such place-based and culturally relevant art in their places of importance. I'll describe a little bit about these pieces so that you can see what I see. You have a figurehead, a face here, who has some type of headdress on. This is actually also a salamander. So there's a wrap of a salamander shape, and then circles, which are his feet underneath. You have this common motif, which is triangles back to back that creates a zigzag pattern, which is something you'll notice if you ever look at the tree line or the Cascade Mountain Range itself. You'll see that pattern of the zigzags, which is representative of the landscape here in Oregon. Then you have these circles inside of circles, like I said, indicating the spirit world itself. And these door handles, which I don't have a fine detail of, but they're a figure with the straight adze. The back side of this door and the inside of the chamber itself, you have a canoe. This is the prow of the canoe, the bow, the stern. You have a person sitting in the canoe with a basket hat on. It's a little hard to see. And then you have those triangle patterns again. And then the other door that I think most everybody comes in and out of has a lot of the same motifs, but once again, you're looking at a figure and a face, and then you're looking at these ornate shapes that is a coyote. You'll just have to take my word for it, or ask me another time. And you're seeing the triangles back and forth. One thing that was really special is, and it's fitting because once again, the art form's on utilitarian objects, right? This is a recycling trash receptacle any way you look at it, but it's ornate, designed with the different images and patterns. So you have three faces, right? Here's the eyes, the nose, the brow itself is here. And you see the same pattern over here, like a tri-platform faces, the head, forehead, nose, eyes, chin, and then you see the rib shape pattern that's down below. So this is a picture of us delivering the sculpture Man from Kashik to the Lake Oswego waterfront. It's a sculpture that's installed there based on one of our traditional stories about a headman teaching people how to eel at Willamette Falls. I encourage you to check it out. We still have canoes today. We paddle on our rivers. You might see us. As a tribe today, we have 7 different treaties from across Western Oregon where those people came to our reservation. That means that we're over 27 different tribes and bands of people on our one reservation. There's around 14 million acres where around 2/3 of the population of Oregon lives, which is the inside areas of those treaty boundaries that I spoke about. We have around 5,500 tribal members, 500 government staff. We run Spirit Mountain Casino, and we have various businesses. So there's a way to stay connected with us. You can send an email to info@grandround.org and ask to receive a digital copy of our newspaper. We'll even send you a paper copy if you want. And we have different community events that people are invited to come out to, which are there. In addition, people are always interested about other sources about tribal history and connection. I've selected these as very specific of people that do port business and may be interested. You have the Willamette Falls Fishery Report, Chinookan Peoples of the Lower Columbia River, Oregon and the Collapse of Illahee, a book all about the process of settlement and displacement of tribal people. If you're interested in plants, Pacific Northwest Foraging is a fantastic book. And then there's an article about Chinookan villages of the Lower Columbia River, which is really spectacular. That is the end of my presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate you and the members of your community coming. It's always important for us to remember where the wealth of our community, both physical in terms of the land and cultural, come from. And I think this is a great reminder for us sitting in this particular place. So I appreciate that. I don't know if others have questions or comments.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Anybody at the port executive team or any actually being aware of these things? First time I ever heard. So great presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah. You know, Commissioner, I think a number of staff were here for this process, and I'm looking out and seeing many of them who were, some of them who commissioned the work, but it was in conversation that David and I had at an event that we had out here in celebration of a traditional site that some of our environmental staff had worked on in another one of these bits of partnership that we started this conversation. I had the same reaction. I wasn't aware of the background, so I'm grateful to you and our friends from the Grand Ronde who are here today. So it was really great.
Going forward, I'm going to be a little more mindful of going through this doorway or that one. Think about that. Wow.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. Dave.
Thank you.
Now I'll call on Kristen Leonard to introduce our next
Great.
item.
Now I'll introduce from here because we have a team of 3 that will be coming and presenting to you. So every year as we ring in the new year, it's also kind of the beginning of another round, if you will, of government relations work. And we have often done presentations about our list of priorities, whether it be for the state legislature or, you know, here's what's going on with the federal government. But we thought there's so much going on in 2019 at all levels of government that we thought it would be great to give you an overview of what's happening at the federal, state, and local kind of on those fronts. So I don't know what order we're officially going to take, but we've got Ann, the youngest. Oh, there we go. Ann Gravitt, who is our federal government relations manager, Ivo Tremor, who is our state government relations manager, and then Emerald Bogue, who is our local and regional government relations manager, are going to go through kind of their portfolios of the types of issues that we're going to be dealing with in 2019 on their front. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ann.
Thanks, Kristen. So again, my name's Ann Gravitt, and I manage federal government affairs here at the port. So the 116th Congress convened last week. As Curtis already shared with you, the focus has obviously been the 25% of the government that remains unfunded. There was a lot of anticipation of sort of hitting the ground running following the November election. And again, you all read the news, you know what's going on and sort of what the holdup has been and what the controversy is. So as you also know, the Democrats regained regained control of the House of Representatives last November. What that means most significantly for the port is that Congressman Peter DeFazio is now the chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, a committee with obvious jurisdiction over issues that the port really cares about, and we will be working with he and his team regularly going forward. What we're I'm highlighting today are just some of the issues that we see as priorities this year. It's the federal government, and I can't always guarantee that these issues will actually be addressed, but they are the ones that I will be spending most of my time on. Infrastructure, it's when we aren't talking about the wall, it is the issue du jour. We do expect it's a priority as well for Congressman DeFazio and hope to see some legislation. The issues that we'll be talking about within the context of infrastructure are identifying federal funding for a seismically resilient runway. This is we believe, a regionally significant investment worthy of federal dollars, both for the port to serve a role following in disaster recovery, following an earthquake, as well as enabling us to return to commercial operation. It's an expensive project. It's one our planning team is spending lots of time on, and again, one we'll be talking about a lot with our delegation. Other thing, I wouldn't be able to have my job as an airport federal affairs representative if I didn't talk about the passenger facility charge. It is the priority of every airport in the country. It is also something that Congressman DeFazio is supportive of moving legislation on. There has been a cap on the passenger facility charge at $4.50 since the year 2000. We would like to see that cap lifted and that amount increased. Turning to safety and security, and my personal favorite issue having to do with the K9 program that TSA manages. These are both passenger screening canines that are managed by TSA employees, as well as local law enforcement dogs that in our case are managed by the Port of Portland Police Department. We have requested of TSA additional canines, so far without success. We've had support from every member of our delegation. We will continue to work on this issue in the hopes that we can have additional dogs. At the airport, I have told Chris Neal and Jason Wallace regularly if we needed security cats at the airport, I wouldn't be as effective or as helpful. So I am glad that this is a canine issue. Other thing, also very relevant in talking about the shutdown, TSA CBP staffing levels. As our airport grows, we need to ensure there's robust federal appropriations for these programs to ensure that we have the level of staffing that we need here at PDX. Air services development. I think Curtis referenced this a little bit in his opening remarks. We need to retain direct air service to Tokyo. The port has had a flight, PDX has had a direct flight to Tokyo for 35 years. This has enabled just very significant business, economic, and cultural connections between Oregon and Japan. The 2020 Olympics are creating an opportunity for some additional slots at the Haneda Airport. It's also tied up in the shutdown, but the State Department is in negotiations with the Japanese government about those slots. Once those negotiations complete, the U.S. Department of Transportation will open a proceeding allowing U.S. airlines to apply for those slots. We are hopeful Delta will apply for a PDX to Haneda slot, and we will be working again with our delegation and many others to support that application, that Delta application. One of the biggest things Congress did last year was pass a 5-year reauthorization of the FAA. There are oodles of policy issues wrapped up in that. In terms of agency implementation, we'll be tracking those closely. Move to the next slide. Turning to our marine business, our top federal priority has to do with the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. This is a long-standing, sort of like the PFC, federal issue for us. It's a fee that is levied on the value of imports when they come into the country at our ports. It is designed that 100% of that fee should go to Army Corps of Engineers operation and maintenance of our ports and waterways. The practical reality is 100% of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund doesn't go to that. It is often used by congressional appropriators to balance the budget or for other things. So ports around the country have been working together to try to come up with an industry compromise. It is also a priority of Congressman DeFazio, given the significance to Oregon ports around the state. We will continue to work on that. We will, back to exploring federal funding opportunities at Terminal 4. We have some needed upgrades we would like to see done at Terminal for anticipated growth, and we will be looking for some federal support for that as well. In the last but very not least category, Superfund, I like to say that one benefit of the length of the Portland Harbor process is that our congressional delegation is highly sophisticated and very well informed about this project, but is on us to keep them updated as we engage with EPA at Terminal 4 and Willamette Cove going forward. And then trade, it goes to the heart of who the port is and what our mission is. We will have continued engagement and support for any trade agreements, bilateral or otherwise, and in the interest of ending on a positive note, sort of hoped for clarity and certainty for Oregon businesses and farmers at a time when it has been highly uncertain in the trade world. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ivo.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, Ivo Trummer, State Government Affairs Manager. I'll talk maybe briefly about, as we're going into session starting next week or the week after, about the legislative makeup after the election. Supermajorities in both chambers. Democrats control more than 3/5 in the House, and 3/5 is important because that gives them the ability to raise revenue without a Republican vote, and exactly 3/5 in the Senate. Session organizational days start Monday next week. That's really the swearing in, and then training days, and then session will start for real Tuesday, January 22nd, and will end no later than June 30th. The legislature in 18 moved those dates a little bit to make sure they're home for the July 4th weekend, and let me tell you, that's a good idea. We expect around 3,000 bills to be introduced, and about, if past experience is any guidance here, about 600 of these to maybe make it to the governor's desk, or in other words, 2,500 bills will generate a lot of excitement, but never actually make it out of a chamber or out of a committee. 4 big issues that legislative leadership has identified that they want to tackle. Budget first. The legislature talks about it in terms of education budget, but it's really a revenue reform balanced with cost containments. And that's about what we know about this issue at this point. Housing is the next one. More money for affordable housing, and probably some policy aspects there too. Tenant protection that have so far failed to pass out of the legislature. Medicaid funding, Oregon is looking at an $860 million hole in Medicaid funding. We have always known about this kind of deficit. It's the anticipated step down in the federal match rate. And the legislature has been working on this for over a year to tackle this one. And then climate, lastly, some cap and trade legislation is expected to pass in the 2019 legislation, and we'll follow that very closely. What does it mean for the Port of Portland in 2019? I'll kind of go through it real fast here. Real ID, more of an educational effort. In October of 2020, TSA will require all passengers to have Real ID compliant IDs to make it through security. Think of a passport or a driver's license that is compliant. In Oregon DMV will not be able to issue Oregon driver's licenses that comply with Real ID until July of 2020. So we will spend the next year and a half educating the public about the need to have probably alternative forms of ID, and also legislature to make sure that we keep people apprised of this one. We expect a lot of firearms legislation this session, and we'll explore if there are opportunities to make our passengers at PDX perhaps more safe in that one. And then seismic resilience. In the current playbook for the recovery after major earthquake, Redmond Airport is the staging ground. We'll want to take the opportunity over the next few years to educate Oregon policymakers that should we be able to seismically retrofit the Portland Airport, that that PDX could be a staging ground for recovery as well. The marine business, Portland Harbor, will continue. We have a bit more change in the Oregon legislature, so there's always the opportunity to educate legislators anew about what is going on in the Portland Harbor. And then Terminal 6 will be continuing conversations about freight mobility and trade in the region. And really, Terminal 6 will be a hook, and not just for marine, but generally about trade and educating legislators about how much Oregon really relies on international trade in terms of our economy. Next slide, thank you. Leveraging the port's strengths. Levee Ready Columbia, you know the levee out here, 27 miles of levee that help prevent flooding here. The airport relies on this. We expect a number of different legislative proposals around levees, some with statewide significance. One in particular that we are following and will work on will aim to create a unified levee district. The 27 miles of levee here have 4 different governance structures. And a unified levee district would help just to make this a bit more rationale and help with funding there too. Climate, as I've mentioned before, we'll watch what happens there. We're very supportive of it and want to make sure that we understand how it might or might not impact our customers here at PDX. Diesel, we are following that conversation, and maybe in the Emerald we'll talk about that a bit more, about how that plays in the regional realm. And then brownfields and the RSIS program, our industrial site development programs at Business Oregon will be supportive there of both budget and policy changes that the department is looking for. We need more industrial land, and these are programs that help unlock more industrial land in the region or statewide as well. Additional priorities, PERS, the unfunded actuarial liability side accounts, goes back to legislation that was passed in 2018 that gave public entities such as the port the ability to invest in side accounts, which help buy down our rate increases over time. We'll be looking there for some technical changes. We'll always care about transportation. The next two items, Connect Oregon is the program name, how the legislature has chosen to fund non-roadway related transportation projects in the past. Going into the next biennium, there is not enough money, and we'll ask for more money. Think of marine, aviation, and rail transportation there. Obviously, we'll watch how the transportation package itself is being implemented. And last, paid family leave. It was mentioned earlier. The legislature will explore creating a statewide program, and at the very minimum, we'll watch to make sure that we can retain the flexibility. Should what is passed be less rich of a program, if you will, than the port, we want to have the ability to continue offering hours on top of what the state might offer. With that, I'll turn it over.
So in regional government affairs, our work is a little different in a few ways. The first is that there's just a lot of local governments. They function differently, different leaders, different responsibilities. The second is that there are no parties. It's nonpartisan. That doesn't mean people don't have differing philosophies at times, but on the whole, it's nonpartisan. And the third is that there are no sessions, so there's no seasons of engagement. It's year round, and the topics really vary depending on what we're dealing with. So our work generally falls into a few different categories. The first two are rather fun, and that's policy alignment and looking for funding opportunities for things that matter to us. The third is sometimes a little less fun, and that's just regulatory, and that's just by the nature of us owning and operating really big things, particularly within the city of Portland. There are a lot of people at the Port of Portland doing regional and local government affairs for this reason, so our relationship is really political and operational. So looking into the year ahead and starting with the airport, of all of the things that the port does, PDX is definitely the best known and most beloved. In the case of what we're up to in the next few years with PDX Next, this is a really good thing. As we engage in the projects, it'll be really important that city and metro leaders understand not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it, and that they feel some investment in it. This is particularly important for the city of Portland, as they have a pretty unique form of government. Commissioners oversee bureaus directly, and every single commissioner is overseeing a bureau that will at some point or another issue a permit on PDX Next. We're also looking for all the help we can get on addressing growing congestion at 82nd and Airport Way. So we'll be looking for opportunities to find funding there within the next year or so. Looking at marine, a lot of our work is really about the shift at Terminal 2. As you all know, we have an agreement with the Portland Diamond Project to explore the possibility of a baseball stadium at the site. There are a lot of land use and transportation challenges related with that, and that's something that the city is just starting to wrap its head around, and what that critical path could look like. We're going to be part of that discussion to make sure that however it lands, it's something that works well for the Port of Portland now and in the long term. Related to this is an exercise called the Economic Opportunity Analysis, and locally we throw it around as the EOA, but it's really part of the city's comprehensive plan, and cities are required to have enough land to accommodate for economic growth. There's a lot of inputs into that, but the two that we have a lot to do with are marine cargo demand and the amount of industrial land in the region. There simply isn't enough. So this will be part of the discussion we're having over the coming year. When when it comes to leveraging our strengths, we get more into the territory of aligning on big policy questions and on funding opportunities. And when it comes to big problems, congestion is definitely a really big one. That's the reason that we've engaged in congestion pricing discussions in the past, and it's the reason that we were such leaders in the Columbia River Crossing project in the past. As conversations rev up again around a new bridge, we'll continue to be part of that. For now, our line is pretty basic. We thought it was a good idea back then, and we still think it's a good idea. But a lot of pieces need to come together to make that a reality. Clean diesel contracting is really a public health issue related to emissions from off-road construction equipment. We've decided to join Multnomah County and the City of Portland in setting a higher standard for equipment used on our future projects. We care a lot about doing this, but we care a lot about doing it in a way that doesn't impact our minority contracting goals. So we will be looking for opportunities to mitigate that impact. Brownfields are an ongoing challenge for the region, and it's really because the brownfields that are left, and there are many, and they're not moving because in many cases the costs of cleanup outweigh the ultimate value of the development. So governments are looking for ways to incentivize more development of brownfield sites all over the region. There's over 900 sites in the city of Portland alone, and so we're part of a multi-jurisdictional group that works on that. Finally, stormwater rates matter to anyone who owns impervious pavement. We have a lot of impervious pavement at the Port of Portland, here at the airport, and at marine terminals. The city's going to be revisiting how they assess those rate structures in the coming year, and we will be paying very close attention to that as it relates to all of our properties. And finally, just like anyone who owns large amounts of undeveloped land, we're struggling with homeless camps on our property. This is a fundamentally human issue. It is a really difficult issue. We're not alone here. We're in the process of evaluating how best to work with jurisdictional partners whose mission it is to balance enforcement with just providing services to the people who need it the most. And all of this, we're really focused on leading with compassion and trying to figure out really who to work with on this. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. We all are.
Any questions? Thank you, guys. Sounds like a lot of hard work coming soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll ask Bobby Stedman and Steve Nakana to present the last general discussion item, please.
Good morning. So last February, we sat before you seeking approval for a social equity policy and promised that we would be back to you in January with an actual equity plan. So that's what we're here to present to you today. But during that presentation in last February, just as a quick reminder, we described to you some of the income disparities within communities of color, and also how historically inequitable policies and practices continue to limit the full potential of persons of color. A couple of examples that we've uncovered as we've worked through this, our own equity plans, are a legislative policy that requires government agencies to sell their recycled IT equipment versus being able to donate their recycled IT equipment. So when you ask the question, who benefits from that piece of legislation, I think it's an obvious answer. So we will seek to make changes in that legislation or in our own processes so that we can look to recycle our IT equipment. Also within our own practices, we'll be looking at insurance requirements and bond requirements around port contracts. So those are just two examples of where, and there's a lot of them, but of where we've had some historic inequities in our processes and practices that we will look to modify going forward. And addressing these barriers and removing these equities serves as an important social justice goal, but more importantly, really, it just all makes us better. Over the last year, so since we met with you in February, we conducted several racial bias trainings. We had about almost 50% of our employees. It was a voluntary training. We had almost 50% of our employees attend that training, including 3 commissioners. After we conducted the training, Steve led the organization through a series of workshops around how do you actually create an equity plan. In that, at the end, we created 18 equity plans. Part of that process included, we did train the trainer workshops so employees could help facilitate with training those workshops. So again, that continues to allow people to further their understanding of what equity is. So at 18 plans, we had 14 trainers and we had 32 external stakeholders that participated in each of those equity planning sessions. All of that is culminated into a what we're calling the Consolidated Equity Plan, which Steve is going to share with you today. You have handouts because the font size is too big to show on the TV screens, but the audience will still be able to see a large screen in front of them. So with that, I'll hand it over to Steve.
Good morning. Thank you, Bobby, for that introduction. What I'm going to do today is just walk you through what we discovered from the 18 equity plans, and I'll be quick about it. And basically, it's just progress as we indicated, and reaching this stage basically is a big milestone for the social equity program because this was one of the major metrics that we indicated we wanted to achieve as we are, designing and implementing the equity program. So as Bobby indicated, there were 18 plans that were developed by the different division at the port, and what we did was to analyze those 18 plans so that we could look at where there were common themes that were emanating from the plans. So we took each and every plan basically identified increasing business participation was a common theme that they identified into the equity plan for one of the outcomes that we asked each and every department to look at. The second theme that came through was making the port a welcoming place to work. And then the third theme that they identified was building community capacity, or to help really find ways of helping our communities increase access to prosperity and things like that. So based on those common themes, we came up with a goal statement which will focus what the port is going to work on, and that goal statement was created because from the equity plan, we realized that is where the port thinks can make the greatest impact into the community. So as you can see on the screen, increased business participation from and access to job opportunities for underserved communities is the goal that we came up with because increasing business participation here at the port was a common theme that emanated through it. And on each and every goal, we have a metric, and we also have some outcomes that we are working to achieve. And so I'll walk you through the outcome on each and every goal that we identified. So each goal has 3 outcomes. We also developed some strategies for how we are going to meet those outcomes under those goals. And we also have some metrics that we are working to achieve, because one of the questions that we get to be asked is, how will you know that you are meeting, making the improvement that you want to make? And I think if you remember, when we first presented to you the social equity program, one of the metrics that I said is we are building a program, and the equity plans was a metric for the program. Now the program has reached a milestone, and these are the metrics that we want to be able to track and measure, and as we are moving forward with the program. So for each goal, there are 3 outcomes that we've identified, their strategies and their indicators that we are going to be working with each and every department to meet. So that is goal 1 and 3 outcomes for goal 1. And this is goal 2. And if you remember goal 2 is very internally focused. We also have 3 outcomes that we're going to be working to achieve. We have strategies that we are working to achieve, and we also have indicator metrics that we are going to be working to achieve. And we also have Go 3, which is externally faced, and the example that Bobby gave basically is one of the things that that IT department, including other departments, have identified that we can use to help, reduce the gaps that underserved communities face out there. And a key thing that I like about what was identified really in the plans is that we are going to engage in equity conversations and learning, because doing this work is not easy and nobody really has a blueprint. So, learning on how we are going to do this work is really a key piece of implementing this program. And one of the key things that we've also identified is you have to be very adaptable and flexible as you are implementing this program, because it is not easy. Thank you.
So now that we have the plans created, Steve is working with each of the plan owners, the 18 plan owners, to flesh out how we're actually going to track these metrics. And so starting fiscal year 19 in July, we will actually start tracking those metrics, and then we will come annually to you and report out on those metrics. Also, we plan to communicate this plan as well as the metrics on our website, and we will post our progress towards completing our plan on the website as well to ensure full transparency. When we drafted the initial consolidated plan, we also sent it back out to the 30-plus stakeholders that participated in the initial workshops and really received some very thoughtful feedback that we then incorporated into the final document that you see today. I want to add that, I think over the last couple of years, we have certainly seen this commission really help us get better at this work. And I feel I'm proud to be able to say that we have a commission that challenges us in our thinking, because it does make us better. I also would say that I think that the last year, we've accomplished quite a bit in the last year. And you can already see it in the way that we think about doing our work and the decisions that we make today. Even I think Kimberly was here presenting the disparity study to you a couple of commission meetings ago. And she has also mentioned that her job is a little bit easier because it's less of a push when we're looking at large contracts. But people are asking the questions about what's available. So the conversation in the organization is already shifting, and I think a lot of that has to do with the intention, the interest, the compassion that people have around this work. And I think the development of the equity plans, over the summer really got people to thinking about, okay, well, how this actually does work. So how do I translate it from words into actually the work that I do here? And I want to thank Steve for all of his work on this, because I think that really in the last year that he's really put a lot of effort into this, and I think that it's really translated into something that's a very tangible work product, and people really feel like they understand where we're going, and I really feel like the organization is supporting the work. So with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Thanks to you both and to everybody who's doing this hard work. Any questions or comments from the commission?
Good job. I would offer, first of all, just continue to encourage you to take the deep looks that you're taking into the business, how we operate, and how we learn. I particularly enjoyed the illustration of the example that you gave, because when we think about this work, we would not default to IT as the place where we would likely see the impact. But it tells us that there are things that we're going to discover through this process. I had the opportunity to hear a briefing on just procurement for some of our vendors, and how we approached the requirement around providing design. Again, it's a barrier to entry for people who may well be able to do this work, and the question is not that we treat everybody equally, but how do we determine that these are prospective partners, and are we providing the opportunity for them to show that? So I do think that we're beginning to see how we can teach each other what we already know in some instances. And so I commend you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Asante sana. Thank you very much.
Vince, I think you have the next item.
So good morning. We are here with our annual review of the Port Transportation Improvement Plan, or also known as PTIP. This is our 20-year look at our transportation needs. And every year we ask the Commission to hold a public hearing for the PTIP. And later next month, we'll ask you to adopt the plan as well. This process is necessary for us to meet regulatory prerequisites for seeking federal grant funding for port projects that we identify in the PTIP. As you know, the port's really about transportation, and it's a strategic advantage for us and our region, but it's also a vulnerability. We're a relatively small market. Good access to markets within and beyond our region is critical for our economy. And this PTIP identifies projects on our facilities, but it also identifies projects on facilities owned by other agencies that can improve access to key markets for our customers. So this is our blueprint to ensure we're strategic about assessing our needs for our customers' interests, that our customers have access to markets, and that we remain attractive for business expansion and job growth. So I'm going to have Phil Healy, our senior transportation planner, just give you an overview of the different kinds of projects that are in here for your review and comment, and then we'll come back next month as well and ask you to adopt the plan.
Thank you, Vince. As Vince mentioned, this is our annual update of the Port Transportation Improvement Plan, and it is one of the documents that helps to guide our direction in transportation investment and grant acquisition. The PTIP is a compilation of projects anticipated to be needed to ensure good access to port facilities and properties within and beyond the region. The projects in PTIP are derived from facility plans, transportation studies, the Port Capital Plan, and improvements needed in conjunction with or required in conjunction with property development. This year's PTIP has 72 projects. These include aviation and marine capital projects, as well as surface transportation projects, such as roadway projects and rail projects. Some of the projects in PTIP are on facilities owned by other agencies, and while the port may be the source of funding for some of these projects, other agencies and the private sector are also identified as potential sources of funding. For that reason, we coordinate our needs with the regional agencies and the state. So all of the PTIP projects must receive public notice and review and commission approval in order for any of the projects to be eligible for federal grant funding. Our draft PTIP has been on our public website, and we provided a published notice of today's hearing to the public in late November. Some of the changes from last year's PTIP include updating it to provide conformance with the recently adopted 2018 Regional Transportation Plan. We also removed Terminal 2 projects to reflect our change in strategic direction for that facility. Some of the Hillsborough Airport projects were modified consistent with findings of the master plan study. And next year we'll be making additional changes to some of the Hillsborough Airport projects after adoption of the Hillsborough Master Plan in March. And this year's PTIP has gone from 79 projects in 2018 to 72 projects, primarily because of project completion, such as the T5 access road and Columbia River anchorages, and then just changes in priorities for the port. A few of the projects that are in this year's PTIP include the PDX Next suite of projects and the 82nd and Airport Way grade separation. And another project is intersection improvements at the intersection of Columbia Boulevard and Coley Boulevard. that will complement the ongoing improvements that are happening at Columbia Boulevard and Alderwood. And that project will, we're working with the city of Portland, that'll improve access from the south to the airport. So our next steps are to have the public hearing. Ultimately, we'll receive comments on the PTIP until the end of this week. After that, we'll finalize the PTIP and return to commission with a request for approval in February. And after approval of PTIP, we will submit our projects to the regional agencies and the state and pursue funding for priority projects as opportunities arise. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now open a public hearing on the 2019 Port Transportation Improvement Plan and ask if any member of the public has comments on the plan. Any commissioner?
I do have one question, Mr. Healy. You mentioned that with the current dialogue regarding Terminal 2 that some projects had been moved out. You know, and I understand why, but at some point, could you sort of speak to if for any reason this doesn't go as we anticipate, have we created issues for ourselves in terms of work that needs to be done that would be on hold for some reason, and we find ourselves 2 or 3 years down the road with an unsuccessful negotiation?
We update the PTIP every year, so we'll be able to be flexible with that. We also have we have a placeholder project in there for a dry bulk terminal. It wouldn't necessarily have to be marine served, but we do have placeholder projects in the PTIP to acknowledge that we may not be fully successful, you know, with our current direction.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Over the last week, Mr. Director and Madam Chair, I think with your coordination, I was able to spend some time with your team and Vince and Keith, actually seeing a lot of the assets up close and personal. And I think it's, I hope other commissioners have had the same opportunity, but it's really enlightening, one, to just see how much we have going on, how much infrastructure it takes to maintain the marine operations that we have going on, the aviation operations from military, from commercial cargo and passenger, and just all of the moving parts and the people that bring it to life, and it is massive investment to maintain it and to improve it and to evolve its use for how the economy has changed and metamorphosized, for lack of a better word. But I think the planning process here is critical to how we kind of set our vision. You know, it's the decade at a glance, which is hard to do, look into the crystal ball and kind of figure out what we want to do and how quickly things are evolving. If you think about Amazon and Prime and just and some of our really great tenants that have improved the viability of Troutdale, for example. Anyway, I just think this is really critical. I like how you're looking at how we get to funding and going to the previous presentations on government relations about how we look at federal, state, and local coordination and looking at what's available to us in terms of sources of funding. And I think we on the commission are a little bit of, we have to be evangelists for the port in the conversation with all of our stakeholders. But anyway, it's just my I guess monologue commending you on the work and the planning and how much I appreciate how much goes into keeping it alive on a day-to-day basis. And it was very enlightening for me to be able to have the opportunity to go see it, to drive around the airfield, to see our assets, to see our marine assets. And for those who haven't done it, I encourage you to do so. And I'm grateful to the team for taking the time to do it. But this planning is critical. And I think if we're looking at, the economy is evolving really quickly, and to be able to have a 20-year plan, I think is amazing. We have to be nimble because we know it's going to change. But I just want to thank you for doing this work and say, keep at it, and look forward to the next conversation with the public on how we go. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hearing no other comments, I'll close the public hearing on the 2019 Port Transportation Improvement Plan. Thank you. And we'll proceed to the rest of the commission meeting.
Thank you.
Does any commissioner want a presentation on the consent items? I'll read the titles. City of Gresham Enterprise Zone Boundary Change, Procurement Contract Capital Bulldozer Navigation Division. Those are the two. Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the consent items.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And Stan, you'll introduce our next agenda item.
I was going to say that's a new cat. I want to drive it. Exactly.
Great. So the port awards a lot of public improvement contracts every year to accomplish all the construction that we take on. It ranges from small to large building improvements, system modifications, equipment installations, pavement projects, and various other capital improvements. And when we go about procuring public improvement contracts, it generally requires a considerable amount of time to conduct these. Can take weeks or months, and it involves many steps from conception through award of the contract. These steps typically include developing a legally enforceable solicitation document or the contract itself, conducting a formal advertisement in local publication, holding a public bid opening, performing a responsiveness review of contractor submittals that includes review of small business goals, and finally execution of the contract itself. So all of these activities require tracking and documentation to public agency requirements. Some projects, however, do require a quick commencement of construction in order to meet operational or other business needs. And for those projects, the time necessary to conduct a separate procurement for each such project often conflicts with those schedule demands, and it also can add significant costs, especially to our small projects. So to help meet those needs and to lower our costs on small projects, the port is looking to replace an existing contracting program that ends in February of this year. And we want to initiate a new on-call general contracting program to expedite delivery of certain types of projects here at the port. So this exemption from competitive bidding will allow us to go out for port staff to utilize a request for proposal process to select up to 5 on-call contractors. And when this process is over and we have selected the 5 contractors, we of course will bring those contracts back here for your final approval. Here with me today is Ken Wilhite, Engineering Senior Manager, and he's going to present this agenda item.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, Commission. So I am here to request your approval for an exemption from competitive bidding to allow us to use an RFP process to select contractors for an on-call general contracting services program, and this will be utilized for small-scale construction projects. This slide is just showing you a little bit of the history that we've had with similar programs. The most recent one that Stan alluded to is the job order contracting that ends in February. But prior to that, between 2004 and 2011, we had a number of programs that were very similar to what we're trying to enact now. So we have a history of utilizing these kinds of programs and find benefit in doing so and want to continue. So what are some of the reasons why we want to use an on-call general contracting services program? It's really that provides the ability to move quickly. It expedites our contracting process. We'll have contractors that are pre-badged and ready to go. They have the capacity and the capabilities at their fingertips. The general contracting model provides us with a full-service project delivery method. We're going to make sure that we have competitive pricing, whether we use what we're calling the solicitation method or the selection method. And another option, this gives us another option, I should say, for doing small projects without just adding them to all the large projects that we have going on. So this gives us another tool for our toolbox. And if we need to, we can coordinate our design with the contractors that we have on board to get their input for a better ultimate project. So what are some of the types of work that we would probably do with this program? It would include building modifications. That could be interior or exterior. Roofing is a prime candidate that we could utilize these contractors for. Small building additions or construction, paving, repairs, maintenance, electrical, HVAC, and other. Just to summarize the benefits, again, a simplified procurement process really creates efficiencies, which allows us to save money, reduce our costs. It gives us a faster response time for customer requests. And we'll have a fully transparent process with lots of data and results that will be available at any time. Some of the criteria that we'll use to select the contractors for this program, and as referenced in the written item, we're planning to select 3 to 5 contractors. But overall experience, we want to know what kind of projects they've done in the past, how they've coordinated multiple jobs and multiple contractors. We want to know more about how they are organized and how they are been successful on other projects, how they can respond quickly and engage with a full subcontractor team. Pricing will be part of the selection criteria, and of course strategies for utilizing small businesses and maximizing that. And I just heard as I was sitting in the audience that we're looking at bumping up the score for that criteria above what our standard amounts or value is. And then social equity is also part of the criteria. As Bobby mentioned in her presentation earlier, we're looking for ways to reduce barriers to small businesses that might want to propose on this program. Specifically, we're looking at flexible bonding requirements and potential reduction of insurance requirements as appropriate for the individual project orders. Here's our schedule. With your approval today, the RFP will actually hit the street probably tomorrow, and then the team would be back to you in March for approval of the actual contracts, and then we would have a 3-year contract duration. With that, we request approval of the Executive Director's recommendation. We'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that in this process you've sort of kept an eye on other goals, both in terms of pricing and quality, as well as the equity piece here. Do commissioners go ahead?
Yeah, I have a question. On the list of potential projects, roofing was on there. Was that like we have a leak, it has to be fixed, or we have a 10-year plan for a roof? And, sometimes roofing projects can be very, very expensive. And that's why I was wondering, does that fit this small?
We have a wide range of different roofing projects that we conduct, and quite a lot of roofing projects in all our facilities. So they can be small that would fit within this program, and then there may be ones that are too large to fit within the program, but it could be either.
Okay. And the other question I had was the flexible bonding, does that increase our risk at the port at all?
Well, we're working closely with RISC on that, and I think it's a program that they're looking at trying to implement port-wide, not just on this program. So they'll be looking very carefully at what's the appropriate level of risk and what the appropriate bonding requirements are for each project, order, or project.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner?
The universe of candidate contractors, are these contractors who are known to us, who we've done business with? Are we looking at people outside of that? Or, is there likely to be some working familiarity with many of these groups?
I think this will be a publicly advertised project or program, and we're working with the small business program to do outreach to try and bring in as many potential candidates as possible. I would expect that we would see some of the people that we've worked with in the past, but we would also hopefully get even more small businesses and other people that we haven't worked with in the past to propose on it. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, I will, the Board of Commissioners will be in recess briefly, and the Port of Portland Contract Review Board is now called to order, which is the same body. I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the findings in support of an exemption and approval to exempt from competitive bidding the on-call general contracting services program.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The Port of Portland Contract Review Board is adjourned and the Board of Commissioners is called back to order, just so that we can adjourn the meeting. So thank you.
Thanks.
Efficient as always.
We thought it would be.
Yeah.